How does a Christian engage in the political issues in the United States today biblically? Or in other words, to what degree should a Christian be involved or not involved with the various governmental and societal issues that are playing out, that are dominating the news, and do so in a way that honors God? I'm Pastor Bryan Catherman. This is Redeeming Life Q&A, where you send in your questions and I do my best to answer them. I pastor Redeeming Life Church. You can find more information about it, or you can find more videos like this one, or ask a question at redeeminglifeutah.org. Now, the question I just posed is not the question that came in on the text messages or in the forum on the website. Now, I have received numerous questions, also through social media, that go more like this. What should we do with masks? Should we for them, against them? What about when our rights are oppressed? What Christian rights, what rights do Christians have? How should the church make a stand for this or that? What should we think about, BLM or protesting? Or can a Christian protest if it involves destroying private property? Or, just on and on and on. What's the Christian's role in all of this? How do we balance what Daniel did, standing against the government with his food rules, versus what we read in the New Testament? Well, these are really complex questions. And in this little short video, I'm not going to be able to deal with all of that. So it's my hope that I could just sort of scratch the surface and help us to start thinking about how we might work through this biblically. And I would encourage you to do a study on this and pray through this and see what God might do to move you, your mind, your heart, your soul, to the convictions that you land on. So what I'd like to do is just look at two scriptures and then talk about it a little bit. Romans 13, this is from the Apostle Paul, who was oppressed by his government and arrested and persecuted. He writes this in Romans 13, starting in verse 1. Let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Well, do what is good, and you will have its approval. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For it is God's servant, an avenger, that brings wrath on the one who does wrong. Therefore, you must submit, not only because of wrath, but also because of your conscience. And for this reason you pay taxes, since the authorities are God's servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone. Taxes to those you owe taxes. Tolls to those you owe tolls. Respect to those you owe respect. And honor to those you owe honor. Wow. Let's see what Peter has to say, a man also dealing with the church in persecution, the emperor doing horrific things and even killing Christians. Peter in 1 Peter chapter 2, starting in verse 13, says, Submit to every human authority because of the Lord, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to governors as those sent out by him to punish those who do what is evil and to praise those who do what is good. For it is God's will that you silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. Submit as free people, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but as God's slaves. Honor everyone. Love the brothers and sisters. Fear God. Honor the emperor. How could Peter and Paul say this? Well, because they understand that God institutes all those who are in authority over his people. It is God who's sovereign over these things. Both political parties. When we have a president in one office or the other, God put that particular person there. And so they're recognizing this and not grumbling in the heart, but having a submissive heart to God's sovereignty. And that's the key issue. Now, there's a few differences between their day and our day. And this is where it gets a little bit more complex. How do we deal with this situation with Daniel? What do we do here when things seem to be going against the Bible when governments are doing some things? Well, unlike Paul and Peter, we have a grand opportunity in our government because we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, are indeed a part of our government. There is no they are government and we are not. Oh, the government's bad and we're not. We are the government. We are a self-governing people by way of involvement, by way of rights. And I know people will go, oh, well, it's not like that, but indeed it is. I want to challenge you to think back to, high school poli-sci. Poli-Sci 101 and just think through this. It is because people are voted for that they're elected. Are you involved in that process? So there's a way Christians can be involved. Register, vote, influence other votes, raise money to do such a thing, serve in that way, support candidates, things of that nature. You can write letters to your leaders. You can communicate with them. I've been emailing all of my various leaders that are appointed over me and sharing my thoughts on the way they're handling certain things, some good, some bad. You're right. You might say, well, it doesn't make much of a difference. Well, if we all did this, it just may. And in fact, it might help sway those individuals, and also voting will make a difference if we all participate in this, voted our conscience in this way. There's lots of things you can do. You can publish a website like they used to publish stories in the paper. You can write a letter to the editor. You can talk with people about various political issues and try to persuade them one way or another on these various things. You can protest. You do have a right to protest. Now, I would encourage that you recognize you need to protest the governmental system, not private property. So, burning down or vandalizing people's private property doesn't seem like you're respecting others and loving brothers and doing the right thing. But the heart of all of this is sort of a submissive heart. So if you're doing out of this out of an anger, bitterness, or out of a sort of an idolatry that if we just get this, then we'll have a God we can worship who will help us. Then this new government will help us, or this new attitude. I think jabbing at everybody in hostile, mean, angry ways is not the Christian way to handle this. But being involved indeed is. And so it says, you can silence the fool by your good works. That's what Paul wrote in Romans 13. And so do this in a good way. Have a good heart. Show what this might look like. And then above all, through all of this, let us pray. Let us be people who pray for governmental change, societal change, things that would honor God. Let us pray for our nation. Let us pray for the authorities over us. We're commanded elsewhere to pray for those in authority over us. And we need to be doing that because God has asked us to do that. And we need to remember that God is sovereign over all of it. So this isn't going to deal with the mass complexities of all of these things. There's massive, massive issues here. But it might get us to start thinking about them. And I would encourage you pray through this and work through this and find a way you can, by doing good with a humble heart as a Christian, engage in the government that we indeed are a part of and in fact are. That would be my encouragement to you. I'd love to hear more questions from you. You can submit those redeeminglifeutah.org. Q&A has a form if you find that on the website, or you can send a text to this phone. This is just our church line. You can also send prayer requests to 385-368-6665. There's no addresses or anything in here, so it's as anonymous as it can be, other than we'll see your phone number. So please feel free to engage, and I would hope that as a Christian you would think through these issues and engage where you feel your conscience leading you to engage. Thanks.